All right, so, oh, cool, thanks so much. All right, so we're gonna start, I'm gonna start with distress markers, because that seems to be the newest thing, and of course everybody wants to know all they can know about them. So I'll kind of take you through, start to finish, some ideas, some tips, some techniques on how to work with these. Been really popular, super fun to work with. So this is the newest product for Ranger at this show, especially in the distress line. These are water-based markers, so these have very similar properties to distress ink. They're available in 37 colors, which means it's a 36 distress colors plus, of course, white picket fence. This will be kind of its own marker, so I'm going to set it off to the side. The great thing about this, of course, all these colors coordinate with the existing distress colors, which make them really fun. And the whole thing about creating these colors that was important to me is developing an ink that would work well with the existing distress line. It would have been easy to just make things that match color, but I needed to have it actually work hand in hand with the stains as well as the ink pads. So some properties that this ink has. First of all, it's going to be reactive with water, meaning when it gets wet, it will do what distress does, which means it will travel out across the surface. So unlike just kind of running like most colors, it will actually travel out. Most important thing though, it's going to maintain its color integrity. So if I color with it and I try to watercolor with it, it will actually keep its color. It will just become a more translucent version of this color, but the red will never turn to pink. It will just create more of a translucent red. The tips of these markers, pretty fun. They're actually a dual tip marker. One tip is going to have a brush tip. This is going to be a flexible brush. So this is going to kind of act like, almost like a paintbrush. If you want to do a wide stroke or just kind of go in and do a thin stroke with that. The other side is a fine point. Now this is a plastic nib. So the cool thing about this is this will allow you to continue to do detail marks. So you can use it for journaling, you can use it for drawing lines, going around stencils. Because it's not felt, it's never going to fray. We'll always keep that detail point, which is really, really important. So like I was saying, as far as it being reactive with water, if I went in, grab some water here. You see a little spritzer? See a little spritzer in there. There we go, it's gonna work. If I hit this with water, you see right away that the ink travels out. That's what distress does. It wants to wick, it wants to kind of get out of its own way. And that means that these pens are never permanent. No matter when you add water to them, they're always going to react. So that's one thing that you need to know. Even if you color on a surface, if you let them dry, they'll dry, but they'll never be waterproof. So if you put something over it, they're always going to blend and wick and move out of the way. Okay, so we'll talk about actually working with these and how we're going to utilize these. When we go to work with them, you can stamp and color, or you can actually color on the stamp and stamp with them. First, I'm just going to show you just stamping and coloring, pretty basic. So I'm going to take a waterproof ink. In this case, I'm going to use archival. So this will be a permanent ink. And the surface that I'm working on, this is a material called specialty stamping paper. It's actually a coated paper that we released at the show. It's pretty cool. So there's samples of it. This is a sample. There's samples here. I'll try to... It's pretty cool. You got to feel it to really know what it is. It is a coated paper on both sides, a matte coated paper. So unlike glossy card, it doesn't have that shine to it. But the cool thing about this paper is that we can use all of our products on it. So if you like to use alcohol ink, for example, and you want to do backgrounds but you don't want that gloss, you can use alcohol ink on this specialty stamping paper. If you want to utilize distress or Adirondack or anything like that, you can use this paper. So I'm just going to compare this to plain cardstock. So the specialty stamping paper is sold in 8.5 by 11 ATCs. This is just showing you the same stamped image on white cardstock, so you can really see the difference in detail, especially when you're stamping with it. You really get all those crisp lines, keeps a lot of good detail.
Hit that one with heat?
Yeah, this one I am going to hit it with heat. You don't necessarily have to heat set it, but you do need to let it dry before you color. So in this case, I definitely want to heat set it because you can kind of see the shine of that archival. If you stamp with other permanent inks, faster drying permanent inks, you probably wouldn't need to heat set. But I like the rich color of archival, just because it's oil-based. That's why I like it, because it really gives it a good pop. So I just want that to be dry. Excellent. I'll wipe the archival off of my stamp. Okay, so now let's go in and color. Now, when I go to color, because this is a water-based ink, the only thing I need to use to blend it is in fact water. So I released 2 new water brushes for this show. This water brush is of course a refillable brush that has that bladder control, which means it's not going to leak water out. it's going to feed through this delivery system in the top. This one is a detailer, and what I love about this is you can see that even though it's a brush, it will always end up as a detail tip. So when you're going in doing coloring, it'll always stay as a point. So I can go and do detail coloring with water, or I can use it as a brush, but it'll always go back to a detail point. The other one though, and one I haven't seen on the market, is I wanted to develop a flat water brush. So this is going to allow me to do a lot of collage work or spreading around with inks or paints. And this is a great flat surface, but if you were going to do larger areas and you need to kind of get in grooves with water, this piece is removable. So this is going to give me much longer bristles to kind of work into areas and slot my color around and do any of the wash, and then you can always snap that right back through and you have a flat brush again. Really fun brushes to use because you can fill them with water or inks or anything like that. So let's talk about coloring. When I go in and do some coloring, I'm just going to color directly onto the paper. And you can use as many colors as you want with this. You don't have to worry about working light to dark, dark to light. You can just go in and put whatever color you want wherever you want it to be. Here I'm just going to add a little mustard seed. And I can go right into that, and I never have to worry about contaminating the markers because the markers will always clean themselves out. Now when I was cleaning a color, I usually wouldn't clean it on paper like that. Instead I would work right on my craft sheet, clean it in its own ink, and just leave the marker there and pick up that color right back off the craft sheet. So let's go and blend it. They're water-based, completely water-based, so they're going to be reactive with water. So you can either go in and just kind of blend all over the background, or in this case I'm going to go in with the detailer and just color this. So I can just pick this color up and actually blend. I can pull some of that red down in there if I want to. If I want to go around this just to create a shadow, I can go in and create a shadow. If we want to go in, actually color the body of that. Now the specialty stamping paper, because it has a coating, when you put color on it and it dries, it will actually absorb into the paper and give it almost kind of a chalk finish. So you can see as that color dries, because we got it wet, it's absorbed under that coating. So if you wanted to make a little bit more of a vibrant color, or you want to add more color to it, you can color right over the top of it, and you don't always have to go in and blend, because once you have a base layer down, your color line is going to blend right in with whatever was there, so you're not going to see any of those harsh lines. And it really gives you full control on when you're coloring your image. Now, doing your background, you also have some options. For the background of this, I've just gone in with some Distress Stain, put it into one of the palettes. This is one of the new palettes we did for Ranger. It's a 36 compartment jeweled lid. The stains just pop right in there. I did a stain palette. This is an alcohol ink palette. This is a Perfect Pearls palette. So you can make a palette for whatever you want it to be. And here I've just gone in, and what I like about using the stains for a background color is if you use re-inkers, that's great, but it's concentrated. So when you first dip your brush into it, your first brush stroke's going to go really intense, and then it's going to feather out. Where the stain, it's just going to give you the same viscosity of the distress from start to finish. So I'm going to actually go right over the top of this. But you're going to see that even though I'm going over this with broken china, you can see that it's not impacting my color, but it is wicking the color that's actually in there. Because these markers are designed to work hand in hand with the other distress. So it's not going to turn the yellow green, even though I add a blue on top of it. It just resists the other distress color, but it will still allow it to blend. So that's one way to use this. Another way to use it, it's pretty cool. Another way to use it is actually stamp with it. So I'm just going to go in, let's wipe this up. We're going to go in with the same stamp, and we'll stamp with it. So here I'm just going to take the side of the marker and I'm going to color directly on the stamp. This will work on a rubber stamp or a clear stamp. And you've probably seen people color on stamps before with markers, but what I love, again, is the ability to go right in there and blend right on the stamp without worrying about ruining or destroying my markers. And you can utilize really any colors you want. And that brush tip will allow you to cover quite a bit of surface. And you don't need to rush. I mean, you don't need to worry about drying time on this. You really have quite a bit of open time or quite a bit of play time with this, because you could actually start coloring this stamp, walk away, come back, and finish coloring it if you wanted to. It's really an unlimited open time with this. We're just going to breathe some hot breath onto it, but just one little quick huff. A lot of people go in and there, just breathe way too much on it. And you don't need to do that. It's just going to be one quick little hot breath. All right. Now the cool thing about these inks as well is that they really work well together. So sometimes you'll think, oh, you know, I'm going to add some color, but I kind of forgot where I colored before, and before you know it, you end up with sludge. You don't really, unless you're coloring over the entire thing again and again, you don't have to worry about that. So our ink on our stamp is pretty much dry. It certainly doesn't look very wet, but you can see a little shine, so we know that we have ink on the stamp. So again, hot breath. You don't need to lick it, or I mean, if you wanted to do some cool things, like maybe you had a snowflake stamp or a leaf or some sort of cool shape that you wanted to mist with water and stamp, you could do that. But remember, when you mist it with water, it's going to react and do what it does. Hot breath on there, stamp it out, and the beauty of this is already blended right from the time I stamp it, and your colors have a really, really cool effect. I love the look of this. But more importantly, I love the fact that because it's distress, it's always going to be reactive with water. So you're able to get a second generation, of course it's going to be a lighter version, and a third generation, but still you haven't muddied your colors. Now, what do you do with this? Well, you've got some options, because you can still go in, I'm just going to take some water on this, clean it off. We can go in and blend this out. So unlike this one that has that black design, I'm just going to use the detail tip of this water brush just to blend some of that color. I don't want to turn this into mud, but I definitely want to go in and just highlight some of that area because this ink is reactive. Now, if you notice, I'm in the habit with my water brush of just cleaning it on my hand, and that's because it'll keep it wet. If you wipe it off onto a towel, it'll take all the water out of the tip. So it's just a good idea to always try to keep that wet. Use that to blend. If you wanted to pick up a color, so let's say you wanted to add a color in there, you can still go in with your marker and just swipe it on your craft sheet and pick up your color and still go back in and introduce a color if you wanted to. So here we're just going to go in, create a little shading. Once you're happy with this, we're going to dry it. Do you have to heat set it? No, but we need it to be dry. So I know I was in there with water. I just want to make sure I don't have any water left before I show you this next part. So my favorite thing, like I was showing you with the distress stains, is the fact that this really works well together with distress ink. And most of us have used distress ink, or we use it in some form. And I am one that I like my stuff a little bit more vintage looking. Doesn't mean you always have to go with brown, but that's just the color I like. So here I'm going to go around the edge with my blending tool, and I really love how this paper takes ink. It takes a really nice soft application of color. And if we've ever colored with yellow or turquoise or anything, we try to pretty much keep the brown away from it, but you don't have to with this. Here I can go right over the top, and it does not affect the color that I stamped with. It's still going to keep the yellows yellow, the turquoise turquoise, and all of that. It blends right over the top. But because it's specialty stamping paper and my background is distress, you can flick water on it. You don't have to heat it, you don't have to dry it, anything. All you have to do is take the water off and you can dry it. It's really a great surface.
After you've dried the distressed ink marker,
yes.
Doesn't matter, it's not going to come off the water this way.
No, unless, like if you sprayed the water, then yes, you can get it to run. Like for example on this one's dry, but if I spray it, it will wick. But let's say you get too much water on it and you don't like it, you can actually go in this paper and you can wipe it off and you still have your original stamped image there. So that's kind of nice if you want to lighten things. It's pretty cool paper. It's really interesting surface. But I love the ability to be able to color with my markers, but then ink right over the top of it. So even if you wanted to ink over it with red instead of brown or pink or green or yellow, you could ink over it and you don't have to worry about it affecting the color that you colored with or you stamped with the markers. But wait, there's more. Okay, because one of the things when it comes to working with the markers is the fact that we have this one. This one's picket fence. So this is a white marker. Now this is not a paint marker and this is not a gel marker. So it's not like our white opaque pen. This is actually a white ink. And the cool thing about it is that you can use it on darker surfaces. So I could use it on craft if I wanted to. I could use it on black if I wanted to. The dual tip on this, you still have a brush tip and you still have a detail tip, but this one is more of a bullet tip. And what's really interesting about this pen is that when you write with it, it doesn't show up until it dries, and then it turns white. So you can go in and actually colorize, and when it dries, it will dry white. And the more you put on, the more opaque it is. So if you wanted to really create a white area, you can just color that, and as it dries, it will become super white, super opaque. So how do you use it when it comes to coloring? Well, if you wanted to go in and add some white highlights to something, you could color right over a surface, whether it's any of your stamped images or anything that's already pre-colored, and you see as it dries, it gets kind of that white, milky look. You can still go in, because it is ink, and you can blend it out. So that will turn the colors that were down there into kind of a milky, creamy pastel, or you can give it more of an aged or patina look as well when you're doing it. Another great thing I like is the fact that I could take a stamp, and remember, it's a distress marker. So just like what we did with our butterfly, I can go with my marker and literally swipe it right across the front of the stamp. Hot breath, stamp it, and it'll dry as white image. It's pretty fun. It's a great way to kind of use it for collage elements. I like to use this to kind of stamp on photos, just to give it that little effect.
What happens if you use a distress marker then on top of that?
If you use distress marker on top of that, it's just going to blend with it. It's just going to mix with it, because these are translucent. So if you go to put this right over the top of it, you're going to see that it's just going to mix right into it. It doesn't have enough opacity. So if you wanted to mix color, you would end up putting that on your craft sheet, and I would probably go in with a dry brush while these were wet. Because if you take a wet brush into something opaque, you're just going to make it translucent. Yeah. But I mean, it's pretty cool that you can get some pretty milky effects to actually go in and watercolor right onto that. Because keep in mind, it's going to dry with that white kind of milky finish. So to me, that's kind of the features of these markers. My favorite thing about it is, of course, the ability to color, stamp, and then still ink right over the top of it. It's pretty cool. Any questions?